Producers, listen up. Do you want to learn music production, but you're tired of wasting time just searching and never really quite finding the answers that you're looking for? Well, today I'm going to be reacting to a video by a popular content creator in the music production space, prodllb. Sorry if I mispronounced that. I'm going to go ahead and add value to what he already has in this video, so that way you walk around with double the value in just one video. So, you ready? Let's get into it.
Are you sick of grinding away at beats but feeling like you're not getting any better? I know the frustration, wasting hours on random YouTube tutorials, feeling overwhelmed, or just ending up with tracks that you don't even like. Trust me man, I've been there. But after 12 plus years of producing, 5 years doing it as a full-time job, and mentoring other producers too, I've learned a thing or two which in hindsight would have sped up my development as a producer tenfold. So in this video, I'm going to give you 7 crucial tips that will help you finally start seeing progress in music production without the need of a crazy budget, expensive plugins, or access to some, crazy bougie studio. So tip number 1 is to remake and then remix songs. I know I'm really frustrated that I didn't actually learn this earlier on, but the concept's really simple. Just take a song that you really like, a song that you like the production on, and dissect it as best as possible. From the chord progression that they use, the layering of sounds, the drums, the arrangement, the mix, the top melodies, literally everything, even from like the smallest details like the panning, which elements were panned to the left, which elements were panned to the right. Really just try and dissect every single aspect of a song and remake it as closely as you can. I've had every single producer that's gone through my mentorship program do this. All of them, including myself, have benefited from doing this because it trains your ear to really dissect, okay, how many elements make up an entire melody? How many elements do you actually really need in a drum loop for it to sound full and complete, with also keeping enough space for an artist to jump on it? All of these little elements sort of slowly train your ear over time to really just figure out, okay, what are artists looking for? How much space do they need in a beat? Or even how simple or complex do you actually need to make a beat?
Excellent point right there. Remaking beats is a great way to learn so much about music production. Personally, that's something I did really towards the beginning of my music production career. That taught me so much, particularly about drum swing. I learned so much about drum swing, it's not even funny. How do we get the bounce on a beat? How do we get the rhythm? How do we get the groove? It's not so easy to accomplish there in the DAW, especially if you're just putting everything right on the grid. And this is a realization I did not come to until I was listening to popular songs. I would get in my DAW and say to myself, okay, what's going on? Or I would A and B their beat versus what I was doing to try to recreate it. And I would notice, okay, mine just doesn't feel the same. Why doesn't it, quite feel the same? And sometimes I just have to nudge certain things in the drums or nudge the melody over a little bit just to hear what that polished, very accomplished music producer was able to achieve, and why I wasn't getting it in my production or my remake of their beat. And that's not something I really would have learned if I didn't actually go through the process of doing it. It's one thing to listen critically, and I definitely do encourage you guys to listen critically to productions that you enjoy, especially without the voice of the recording artist on it. But taking this time to make a beat over, man, I'm telling you, it's going to open up a lot of doors. It's going to bridge the gap on where you're at and where you want to be much quicker, when you can hear those little nuances on why certain beats are so addicting. And another point that he made there is about, the melodies and leaving space for the vocals. And one point I like to drill home, especially on my live heat check beat review show. You can find a link to submit your beats to that, and I'll be glad to give you my free feedback on your production. But one piece of feedback I always give to producers is you have to remember that the last instrument is the human voice, and we tend to forget that, especially when we're cooking up in our bedrooms or our homeboy's place, or even a recording studio. Sometimes we forget that the human voice is the last element, and sometimes we can clutter the sonic space, clutter the mid-range, and then the artist doesn't quite know where to fit and where to jump on the beat. And that's something that you can maybe even figure out much quicker if you do remake beats more frequently. It's not something I did too much, but just taking his tips, taking his advice, maybe you guys can even try that out. remake other beats more frequently, and see what kind of skills you can develop in the process. And you can also maybe even find certain weak points in your skill set and learn that that's certain aspects that you need to kind of hone in on to skill up. Maybe it's your bass management, maybe it's your kicks, maybe it's your snares, maybe it's your hi-hats. You know, maybe there's something there that you need to improve on, and remaking beats can kind of help you pick that out much quicker. So great advice so far. I'm glad he said that. I definitely co-signed that. So let's go ahead and move on and see what else we can get in this video.
The producer I'm working with called Alistair right now, he makes really good beats, you know, really advanced stuff, lots of layers, lots of things going on, lots of textures, but everything's just kind of overfilled. He was just taking up all the space. So I was like, go ahead, listen to some kind of M Huncho, Gunner, melodic stuff, go and remake some of their music. First session back, he was like, man, I didn't realize how simple the drums were, how repetitive things were, and just how much work I didn't actually need to do. So remaking songs initially, super important, really just rep it out. Then I'd move on to remixes, where you just take the acapella from a song that you like and then just make a beat around that creatively. Be free, you can do anything you want at this point, because now you have the foundation from doing remakes of what actually makes up a full sounding song and what creates a vibe that you're trying to achieve. Now you can go ahead and just do your own thing, add your own spin to it, you know, add your own sounds, and really just find your own flow with it.
Remixes. Now, I've done a few remixes in my day, and they're certainly fun. You know, having the acapella of a popular recording artist and adding your own beat, adding your own sounds, it's really fun. It's almost like we're collaborating with our own imagination, and we can use that artist's vocals. And I love that. I love that feeling of having the magic of the artist's vocals with my production. I really wish I would have taken the time to do more remixes back in the day, just because you never know where it could take you. For example, someone like the producer Ninth Wonder, he got very popular remixing Jay-Z's The Black album, and you know, adding his boom bap sound to that. Also, Danger Mouse, I think his name was Danger Mouse, that producer. He had an album called, I believe it's the Gray Album. Guys, please fact check me. I'm just going off the top of my head. He did something called the Gray Album. I believe it was a remix of Jay-Z. Jay-Z had some acapellas out there back in the day. And so many people were able to get popular by using the acapellas and creating remixes and just reimagining where the artist can go. Like I mentioned earlier, the human voice is the last element on the beat, but you could just create an entirely different landscape, an entirely different vibe, take people on an entirely new emotional journey just by adding your own instrumentation on top of that artist's vocals. So, you know, not only is that great practice to, you know, production and making your own beats, but you never know, if you put it out there, whose attention you can get, and you know, where you could possibly go career-wise. So, you know, don't be afraid to try remixes. I know there's a lot of things that are touchy as far as copyright and content ID. So you guys may want to check that out before you drop any type of remixes online. I think way back in the day, I got a pretty hard strike on one of my channels for doing a remix, and maybe that kind of scared me off for a while. So, you know, fact check, do your Googles, and figure out where things are with remixes and posting them. But, you know, you never know, man. Take the risk, see what you can do, and sky's the limit.
Now, tip number 2 would be to break the learning process down. Try not to overwhelm yourself too much by watching a bunch of random tutorials that aren't really designed in a structured way for you to actually learn specific elements of production. For example, you might watch a video on how to make a Gunner type beat, and that's an entire Gunner type beat from scratch, melody, drums, mixing, arrangement, everything. Then you might jump to like a sample making video on how to make soulful samples. The point is, having a bit more of a logical structure of how you learn production is going to be way more effective than just jumping around between random tutorials, even random video courses. None of them are going to be helpful if you don't follow sort of a logistical workflow that works for you. So I'll break it down into sections that logistically make sense, ones that I can focus on solely until I get really good at it, move on to the next. Each one kind of compounds, and then by the end of it, you have the skills to create really full, professional, placement worthy, artist worthy, sync worthy style beats.
You know, that's an interesting point. Having so many options these days is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because you can kind of get lost. And one thing that I mention quite frequently in my videos is, when I started, we didn't have all of these options, all of these tutorials. I started originally before YouTube even existed. So we'd have to get on different message boards, maybe try to find different courses, buy different courses, and just really try to figure it out on our own. But now you guys have unlimited options. So I can see how it can be a little confusing. You know, do I need to work on my melodies? Do I need to work on my drums? Do I need to work on my mixing? Do I need to learn to record? You know, do I need to make samples? You know, what exactly do I need to do? And then I could just jump on YouTube, get it all for free, and just say, okay, let me just overload myself with all this free content and all these tips and tutorials. So it does make sense to create a system and learn things little by little in bite-sized increments. Not only that, you don't want to get too hooked on just watching the tutorials, because one of the best ways to learn is to learn by doing. So if you're going to take time to watch tutorials, maybe you could have like week 1, you learn how to make better drums. Week 2, you're going to work on mixing. Week 3, you're going to work on melodies and chord progressions. Week 4, you're going to, you know, learn a little bit about engineering, you know, kind of breaking things down in a system that you can measure, so you're not just kind of just floating around and going along with the wind, just kind of floating around like a bag in the wind, because you guys do have so many options. And you know, I used to hate it back in the day that we didn't have so many options, but it did force me and other producers of that era to just kind of figure it out. So I recommend that you guys still find a balance of consuming content, whether it's free videos, whether it's a course, whether it's the manual, and also taking action. Don't just be an information junkie. Take the information in, do the action, and then get feedback and see exactly where you're at. You can get feedback from me on my live beat review show. You can get feedback from a friend who's a rapper. You can get feedback from a friend who's a singer. You know, just get that information back and just keep going. Move the ball forward. You need a little bit of a system to educate yourself, so you're not just wasting time, kind of just once again floating around with the wind. So definitely great advice, a great thing to point out, especially for this generation. So yeah, definitely stand by that. So let's go ahead and move forward in this video.
I like to do it is drums. I found that drums are the easiest to get good at first. Then I'll move on to melodic elements, breaking down chords, top lines, melodies, instrumentation. I'll put those two together and then start working on the arrangement. So how can I evolve the track over time so that it's not just like an 8-bar loop? Then I'll move on to mixing. Okay, how do I get this to sonically sound pleasing, and how do I get it to really jump out at someone when they're listening to it? And then the last step is just learning how to get this thing loud, not too loud to the point where it's killing the speakers, but loud enough to a point where it'll stand out in a sea of beats that are flooding the market.
I just want to jump in right here. That was also great information, but I want to say this to you guys. Be patient with yourself, because you're learning so many different things. You know, I ran into another producer at a studio a couple months ago, and one thing that he mentioned is that he feels like he has to work on so many different things. He has to get his drums right, he has to get the mixing right, he has to get his melodies right, and he has to make sure he consistently creates content. So it's like, it's just so much going on. I'm just making sure that nothing, you know, gets left, and I don't, you know, have one thing kind of float away. So one thing I want to drill home to you guys, other than, you know, of course, creating that system that I mentioned, breaking things down, learning and taking action, learning and taking action. On top of that, once again, I got to reiterate, to be patient with yourself, because you're not going to learn all this stuff overnight. Even if you're really good with drums, you may not be that good with melodies. Even if you're really good at melodies, you may not be that good with arrangement. Maybe you're good with drums, melody, and arrangement, but then when it comes to mixing, you don't know how to get the polished sound. You don't know how to get things snappy and just hitting, and the 808s just round and subby, but at the same time still having the mid-range to cut through on small speakers. So there are quite a few different things going on. So I can empathize with you guys. So be patient with yourself. This is a learning process, not a learning goal, learning process. So take things bit by bit, step by step. Then over time, you're going to notice that you've improved. Over 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, you could look back. Each time you're challenging your comfort zone, you're getting better and better and better, and you stuck in there. You didn't give up, you stuck in there, and now you can see the improvement. So I just wanted to jump in and add that tidbit to that point.
Now, tip number 4 would be to put the right amount of reps in. I've worked with enough producers now, and I've heard every single excuse under the sun as to why people can't get work done, why people can't just put the reps in. But the key to anything in life outside of music production, it doesn't matter, is to just put the reps in. Get yourself in the gym, get in the creative gym, really just put the time into getting better at the art of production. Nothing's gonna come easy. I point every producer I work with in the right direction so that they're not making silly mistakes and they're not wasting time. But in order to get good at music production, you have to put the reps in. I heard this saying the other day that someone said, it was like, people put part-time effort into something that they want to do full-time. And it rings true, man. Totally understand if you have a full-time job, families to take care of, all that kind of stuff. But if you actually really want to do music full-time, then I can't do the work for you. No one else can do the work for you. You just have to put the reps in. You have to find the time, manage your time a little bit better, and just put the work in to get better. You'll make a mistake, fix it, make another mistake, fix it. You do that every day or every other day, and by the end of the year, you've got no more problems to fix. Everything's sounding good, cohesive, and you've good at production.
That's another great point. You guys have to consistently put in the work if you want to be able to see the results. It is, again, kind of similar to the gym. You can't just go to the gym here and there once or twice. You got to consistently go 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 5 times a week, week after week after week, before you can finally start to see the results. You see new muscles, you see new cuts, you see new, your shirt looks different over time, and that's because you've been investing in yourself little by little over a longer period of time. Speaking of having limited time, I want to touch on something. This is something called Parkinson's law. Now, what is Parkinson's law? Parkinson's law is the idea that as time expands, so does work. So if you have 4 hours to cook up beats, let's just say you do have that time. Sometimes you can find yourself scrolling on TikTok, looking at Instagram, getting on Netflix, talking to your friend via text message. And for some reason, you're not getting as much work done, even though you do have 4 hours to get this done. That's, once again, called Parkinson's law. As time increases, so does the work. So if we squeeze that time down to, let's just say 30 minutes, or let's just say 45 minutes. Let's say all you have is 45 minutes. The mind has the ability to just concentrate and lock in and just totally zone out and just focus on the task at hand. So you can possibly get more work done in 45 minutes of focused, concentrated effort, as opposed to 4 hours of scrolling on TikTok, texting your friend, getting distracted, going to get food, all that stuff that's distracting you, even though you have 4 hours in one scenario and 45 minutes in the other scenario. You can likely get more done in that 45 minutes as long as you're super concentrated, super locked in, and super focused. And I say that because one thing I used to do is I used to come home on my lunch break. All I had was 15 minutes to make beats, and I would just put my phone down, I would eat, put my phone down, get on FL Studio, and totally lock in. And I'm telling you guys, I've made some of my best beats by doing that. On my lunch break, 15 minutes, turn everything off, FL Studio right there, just concentrated. I'm sure I look like a crazy person. I would just concentrate and make as many beats as I possibly could, made a few ideas, made a few full beats, but the fact that my mind was totally locked in allowed me to be super creative and not look at time as a limited resource. Even though it was, I knew I had to fit as much in this small time span. So I want you guys to be conscious of that when you make the point that you don't have too much time, or life is happening, or you have school, you have work, maybe you have children. I understand everybody has so many different things going on, but please make sure you cut out the distractions and understand, if you do schedule out a large block of time, find a way to concentrate, maybe even put on a timer, but totally lock in as if you had other things going on. So that way you're totally tuned in, you're totally zoned in, and you can accomplish your goals. So that's another tidbit I just want to add to that point.
At least get in front of your laptop 5 to 6 times per week. Even if it's for like half an hour, limit yourself. If you've got no time, put a little 10-minute timer on and challenge yourself to create something in that 10 minutes. But just keeping that brain active, keeping the creative flow rolling is Super important when it comes to improving as a music producer. Now, tip number 4 is to set limitations. A lot of people think that if you don't have expensive plugins, if you don't have all the craziest drum kits, then you'll never be able to succeed in production or just make tracks that you're really happy with and that resonate with other people. Completely false. Absolute bullshit. I saw a clip the other day of a producer in hip hop called Jetson Made, and there were a bunch of clips of him breaking down like all the popular songs he made for DaBaby before they came out, and literally every single beat had like 4 sounds in it. They were the most simple beats I've ever seen in my life, and they turned out to be massive hits. So the point is, setting limitations can actually be a better thing. One thing I know for us as producers, the longer we make music, the more we feel we have to add to our production. We add all these different accents, all these different layers of all these crazy mixing techniques, to the point where we actually start overfilling the beat and things just get too crowded and too hectic. There's actually no more room for an artist to even do their thing on it anymore. So no matter what level you're working at, if you're a beginner or if you're more advanced, set yourself some limitations. Make a melody with 3 sounds. One main instrument, something that will probably loop throughout the whole beat, something like a piano, a guitar, Rhodes, synth keys, something that's just nice and full. Then use a top end instrument for like a lead or something like that, like a flute or string or vocal chop, something like that. And then for the third instrument, just use a bass, you know, sub bass, synth bass, 808, guitar bass. And you'll be amazed at how much space is actually created simply by taking elements away, simplifying the whole process and keeping things open for an artist to come in and do their own thing on it.
Yeah, that's a great point in reference to first how producers, we do feel like we have to keep spending more and more money to get the newest, coolest, latest gizmo, latest gadget. And to be honest, we're targeted so much by YouTube ads, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, just telling us, you know, just get this. This is going to make life a lot easier. You know, come on, just get this. You don't even have to pay it all up front. You could break it down in little payments with a firm or Klarna. You know, just go ahead and get it real quick. Very seductive, very seductive. And when I started making beats, man, especially when I got on Reason, I had a hard time finding quality sounds on Reason. I had a hard time finding really good refills. So I had to learn how to tweak and move and change knobs to just make my own patches. I had a really nice folder of my own patches. And not only did it force me to be creative with limited sounds, but it also helped me develop my own unique sound, my own unique texture. When I wanted a pad, I knew I had this one pad sound. It just sounded so dirty and grimy. And it's something that I had to put together myself. So having more options isn't necessarily always a good thing. So once again, like you mentioned, you know, try to challenge yourself using a few things, maybe not using so many different sounds, maybe not using so many different VST. Find a VST that you really like, lock in, and really learn it. You know, maybe try looking at the manual. That's one thing that I had to have another person tell me is, Desmond, did you read the manual? That's one thing I had to learn. You know, you never know what features you can find there in some of those VSTs, as opposed to jumping from one plugin to another plugin, watching a cookup of a producer, seeing that plugin and saying, hey, I need to buy that plugin. Understand, I get the allure of possibly doing something like that. Now, speaking of that, just want to let you guys know that I do have free FL Studio Patcher plugins that you can get. Go to DesmondASounds.com, get those free FL Studio Patcher plugins, and those are made of stock plugins, and it's just a new plugin that's made on top of those stock plugins. So make sure you download that, use it, make some great beats, get some great mixes with those plugins. I 100% stand by them. But moving forward to his next point, as far as using a limited number of sounds, it actually sounded like more like a challenge to me. That sounded like something that he may even give to his students to do, to limit all the sounds that they're using in their production. That's not something that I've personally done, just giving myself explicit restrictions. I just tell myself, is there enough space for the artist? And if I'm kind of having an issue, like, I don't know if this is enough sounds, I don't know if this is too many sounds, I always err on the side of caution of not having enough sounds. So if the beat sounds a little empty, I'm going to go with that, as opposed to the beat being a little too busy, just because I know the artist can use their voice to add ad-libs and maybe even have a background vocalist add more things to the beat. So now they have more space to write, as opposed to too little space to write. And of course, the artist is always going to choose the route of having more freedom, as opposed to just being totally blocked in and locked in by all those melodies and sounds that you think sounds good, but they think, oh, please get out of my way. So it's another great tip. You know, might want to go ahead and give that challenge that he mentioned there in the video a try and just, you know, see how it comes out. What kind of results do you get? And try freestyling over it, rapping over the beat, and seeing if you have a clear, wide open path and you feel confident that an artist who hears this beat is going to actually want to purchase it and use it for the next song.
Not only is it about setting limitations and creating space in a beat, but it's also about stretching that creative ability for you to make the most out of the sounds you only have access to. You know, you got to think about it, like rock bands and stuff, they've got a couple of guitars, a drummer and a singer. Like there's not much going on, but they're able to just be super creative with it and create an infinite amount of different vibes, different bounces and different sounds. Yeah, try not to make any different for us, man. Limit yourself makes a huge difference and you actually end up making better music because of it. Tip number 5 is to use systems creatively. Now, I know in music it is a creative process. You know, it's about the art. It's about creating something you're just really proud of, something that sonically is amazing to anyone that's going to listen to it, including yourself. However, without some fundamental understanding of just a few concepts, music can sound absolutely dreadful. I can't tell you how many producers used to submit beats to me when I used to live stream, and even some producers today that I mentor who think they have their own sound. They started music maybe at the start of the year and they really just want to create their own sound off of the back of not having any knowledge and any fundamental understanding of music, which is a big problem. So using systems creatively is the best way to go about it, because that way everything's grounded in what actually works and what people actually resonate with, and then you can use that system and be creative inside of it and break the rules from then on. Understanding that first and then being creative within those frameworks makes a whole bunch of difference to your production. So
yes, I have seen that same thing also personally. Sometimes producers will get started in production and feel like, well, I just want to make my own rules. I just want to feel. I just want to be. Let me just I just want to throw sounds out. If you want to make the music for you, that's fine. You know, you just find making beats is something creative that you want to do for your own satisfaction. That's perfectly fine. But similar to how he mentioned and I mentioned also, you know, making beats and the learning process in general can be similar to like the gym. You know, there's a way to do curls. There's a way to do, you know, tricep pull downs. There's a way to do the bench press that's going to give you the optimal results so you can get what you're looking to achieve in the future. And there are people out there who have the information that could help you get to that point so you don't injure yourself or you don't waste time or you don't embarrass yourself. You know, you can reach out to me, you can reach out to this content creator here that I'm reviewing, and you can get the advice to help you get to that point. But if you have your ego blocking you and you just feel like you're just so out there, you know, I'm just so different. I've just unlocked this new sound. And no, that's all ego talking. And that ego is going to block you from growing. Somebody's going to give you some good advice and you're just going to reject it because your ego is telling you you have the answers to something that you don't quite have the answers to yet. But you have to come into the process with an open mind, because if you don't, you're just going to be lost. You're going to be trying to figure out things on your own. And you're going to not know why you're not getting to where you want to get to. And that's not a really good place to be, because if you get to that point and you can't find a solution, that's when people start either giving up or start degrading other producers or maybe other people who have achieved things in the music game. They kind of feel like everything is, you know, whatever, there's some type of conspiracy. And that typically comes from people not really having a process on how to grow and how to get to that goal and that point that they want to reach. And on top of that, that is a part of that is learning how to structure things in a way that's appealing to the ear. You know, there's a reason why we do gravitate towards Turbo's beats, why we do gravitate towards Ninth Wonder's beats, you know, while we do gravitate towards Metro Boomin's beats. He has a certain way that he's structuring things, and you may not quite know what he's doing just by listening, especially if you're somewhat new to music production. So that's where mentorship comes in, trial and error, and also just getting advice and coming to the learning process with an open mind. It's like a dojo, and, you know, we're the senseis, this music production coaching type of people. We're the senseis. We're here to help you get to that point that you're trying to get to. So come in with the open mind so we can help you. So
you can use that system and be creative inside of it and break the rules from then on. Understanding that first and then being creative within those frameworks makes a whole bunch of difference to your production. So learn from songs that you resonate with, even if it's not a super viral song, just one you really resonate with. You just love the mix of it, you love the arrangement. Copy them if you have to, take inspiration, and then mold them into your own workflow. All right, now tip number 6 is to learn from others who are further ahead. This one should be kind of obvious. I thought I'd just throw it in there. Just being an absolute sponge to the right people will speed up how good you get at production crazy fast. Take any other discipline, for example, take football or basketball. You can go ahead and watch some random tutorials or just go and train by yourself, you know, take some jump shots, practice dribbling or whatever. But without someone there in front of you, like a coach or a mentor with more experience, who's been there, they've been through the mistakes that you're facing, and they've just got a bunch of years experience and put a ton more reps in than you at this point, then you're almost trying to learn something blindfolded. You don't really know what mistakes you're making. You might not even be aware that you're making mistakes. So this whole learning process is just going to take 10 times longer than if you have someone there to say, just don't do that, do this instead.
Yes, mentorship is a major cheat code. Man, I can't tell you how powerful mentorship is. You get to download someone else's experience and upload it into your own mind. So that way you're skipping, I don't want to say you're skipping steps necessarily. Let me just say that you're kind of borrowing someone else's mistakes and the lessons they learned from those mistakes and applying it to yourself without having to go through the direct pain, because they've already, you know, paid for the price to learn it. You know, it sounds kind of messed up when I say it out loud, but it's actually true. You know, the power of mentorship just can push you so far ahead so quickly, especially with a mentor who actually cares about you, who actually wants to see you grow, who actually wants to see you succeed, where it's not like pulling teeth to try to get them to help you. They actually want to see you succeed. And man, and that's helped me so much. I can't tell you that, especially more specifically when it comes to recording and working with recording artists. That's really where I've really cut my teeth getting mentorship. And you can even say that that's a type of production, working with artists with either my beats or other beats, and, you know, learning how that whole interaction should go. You know, how do you deal with different personalities? How do you deal with EQs? How do you deal with compressors? How do you deal with a poorly treated recording environment, and how do you get the music to sound good coming back even though things weren't in a totally treated booth or recording studio? You know, these are things that I was able to learn from other people and apply to myself, and that's how I was able to, you know, get a pretty solid reputation being able to record different recording artists. So man, especially when it comes to directly making beats, I wish I did have access to that, especially back in the day. Unfortunately, I had to be the one to pay the price, learn the hard way, like he mentioned, not know that you're making the mistakes that you are making, and then eventually grow later on in the process through trial and error. So, you know, of course, if you want to come to my channel, I'll be glad to give you guys advice. And of course, you have the option to book a one-on-one coaching call with me. Link in the description. You can go ahead and check that out. Book a one-on-one coaching call with me. I'll be glad to help you out with any questions that you have. So, great point. I just want to go ahead and add a little bit onto that.
Full transparency, I've had a bunch of mentors. I've learned from the likes of Al Hug, amazing producer, amazing sample maker. I've learned from the likes of Dark Label, who helped me with the business side. And every single time I've hired some form of mentor, I saw some crazy progress, and I was just on a clearer path of knowing what's right and what's wrong. Or not so much what's right and what's wrong, but just understanding concepts and processes from those guys who are a lot more experienced in certain areas of music than me, helped me kind of mold it to my own thing and develop my own path in music. Which actually leads me nicely onto tip number 7, which is find your own path. After you put all of these other 6 tips into practice, then now it's time to start finding your own path. Weirdly, some producers skip all 6 steps and go, I'm just going to figure all this out by myself. And I get it, man, like your ego will kick in, our pride kicks in, and we just want to do everything ourselves. But just having others to help you along the way, using some of these production tips like doing remakes and remixes, all build the foundation that you really need in music production. You need to know some basic theory. You need to know how to arrange a beat. You need to be able to create good music with only a limited amount amount of resources, because you're never going to start off and have access to some crazy bougie studio unless you're, you know, some silver spoon kid who's got super rich parents that can set you up with all of that. I'm going to assume most of you don't have that. So lay the foundations first, learn your theory, learn from people that are a little bit further ahead than you. Honestly, just try and copy and emulate the people who you look up to. Get really good at that, master that side of things to the point where you could just recreate a Metro Boomin beat in your sleep, and then take all of that knowledge, take all of those reps, take all of that experience, and then you can mold it into your own sound. And you'll be surprised, man, this doesn't take 10, 15 years. This can take 6 months to a year, so long as you're, you know, doing the 6 tips that I've given you in this video.
Now that was a great final point. Find your own path. You know, that's funny that he says that. It actually sparks a thought in my head. I would say find your own path. Of course, apply the tips that he's given in this video, because I co-sign it very much for the most part. You know, take the advice from my YouTube channel, apply it to yourself, but at the same time, be open to a pivot. And what do I mean by that? Being open to a pivot means that you're going in a direction, but then an opportunity opens up right there, and then you just kind of keep going. See, you're still on the path, but you're just pivoting a little bit from your initial destination. For example, for me, I started out mostly as, you know, a beat making producer, a producer who just makes beats, sold them online. I sold them in person, and I sold them way back in high school. I've done all of that stuff. But, you know, later on in my career, I learned recording, and I learned mixing, and I learned how passionate I can be about that, how focused I can get in, almost to the point where I forget to eat when it comes to production in the realm of recording and mixing. Is that I get so locked in. But if I wasn't open to that pivot, then I would have maybe rejected the opportunity to help someone out when they needed me to record their artist, and I would have never discovered that I actually do have a love for the recording process, the mixing process, and I would just said, well, no, just, you know, let me know if they need some beats. But I was open-minded, and in that process, that just made me a much more well-rounded producer. I know how to coach an artist through their vocal takes. I know how to, you know, switch the beat up from a pre-made beat that they may have gotten on YouTube, an artist may have gotten on YouTube. I know how to, you know, give ad-lib ideas. All these different things all come together, but I wouldn't have developed these skills if I was closed-minded and I said, hey, this is all I want to do. I just want to be in the studio cooking up nonstop. So as producers out there, as you're listening to this video, you know, keep your eyes open as you're developing. You never know. Maybe you pick up the bass one day in your music production journey just because you want to pick up the bass, and you find a passion for it. You find a love for it. But you say to yourself, I didn't come in to the game to be a session bass player. I came in to be the next Metro Boomin. But always keep that in your back pocket. You know, your love for the bass guitar, your love for the acoustic guitar. These are things you may be able to apply to the role of producer that could just make you so much more valuable. So in the process, as you're learning these different things, keep your eye out when you find that other thing related to music production that just sparks your interest. Don't reject it. If you love it, add it on to the repertoire of what it means to be a music producer, because some people think a music producer is a beat maker. Some people think the music producer is the one in the studio coaching the vocalist. Some people think the music producer, even now, some people feel a music producer is a loop maker. You know, the role of the music producer is continuing to change and evolve. And I don't want you guys to be closed off to something that could jump out at you and you just reject it because you feel like you need to be super rigid. So great point. I just wanted to go ahead and add my 2 cents onto that. And it looks like that's our final tip of this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit like and subscribe. My name is Desmond A, and I'll be back with more great videos. Peace.
That's my name.